Have you ever looked at history and wondered why great empires, from the Romans to the British, rise to incredible power and wealth, only to eventually fade away? It feels like a story that repeats itself over and over. Well, what if I told you there's a predictable pattern behind it all? A formula. Almost legendary investor and founder of Bridgewater Associates, Ray Dalio, spent decades studying this very question. He analyzed the last 500 years of history and distilled his findings into a powerful framework he calls the Big Cycle. In this video, we're going to unpack Ray Dalio's groundbreaking insights from his work on how nations win and lose. We'll explore the hidden forces that dictate the rise and fall of empires, the cycles of wealth and power, and most importantly, what these massive historical shifts mean for you and your money. Right here, right now. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a roadmap for navigating the future. So, stick around, because understanding this cycle could change how you see the world. To understand Dalio's grand theory, we first need to grasp the three major, interconnected cycles that drive history. Think of them as massive waves, all moving at different speeds but ultimately crashing on the same shore. First, you have the long-term debt cycle. This isn't your monthly credit card bill. This is a cycle that can last 50 to 100 years. It starts when credit is cheap and easy to get. People borrow, invest, and the economy booms. Asset prices go up, everyone feels rich, and the good times roll. But eventually, the debt load becomes too big to handle. The bubble pops. Central banks then face a choice. Let everything collapse in a painful deflationary bust, or print money to devalue the debt and create inflation. Dalio shows this pattern has repeated for centuries. The second major force is the internal order and disorder cycle. This cycle tracks the health of a society from within. In good times, when a country is productive and growing, the wealth gap is often manageable, and people generally feel a sense of shared purpose. But over time, especially during the late stages of that debt cycle, wealth inequality tends to explode. The gap between the haves and have-nots widens dramatically. This breeds resentment, populism, and intense political polarization. People stop trusting the system and each other. Sound familiar? This internal conflict can escalate from protests to full-blown civil strife, threatening the very fabric of the nation. Finally, we have the external order and disorder cycle. This is the global Game of Thrones. It charts the rise and fall of world powers. A rising nation typically wins a major conflict, like the US and its allies after World War II. This victory allows them to write the rules of the New World Order. Their currency often becomes the world's reserve currency like the US dollar has been, which gives them incredible power and privilege. They can borrow and spend in their own currency, dominating global trade, but no empire lasts forever, as a dominant power becomes over-indebted and internally divided. A rising rival power, which has been investing in its education, infrastructure, and military, starts to challenge it. This leads to trade wars, technology wars, and eventually, the risk of a military conflict that could decide the next world leader. The key thing to remember is that these three cycles don't happen in isolation. They feed into each other. A massive debt bubble can worsen wealth inequality, sparking internal disorder. A country torn apart by internal conflict is weaker on the world stage, making it vulnerable to external challengers. Dalio's genius was in showing how these three forces sync up to create the big cycle of the rise and fall of nations. So, how do we know where we are in this big cycle? Dalio identifies several key indicators that act like a dashboard for the health of a nation. It's not about predicting the future with a crystal ball, but about recognizing patterns. First, let's look at the mechanics of the debt cycle. A major sign of a late-stage cycle is when debt levels, both public and private, are astronomically high compared to the size of the economy. At the same time, interest rates hit zero. When that's not enough to stimulate the economy, central banks, like the Federal Reserve, resort to printing massive amounts of money, a process we now call quantitative easing. This is a classic late-cycle move to keep the system afloat, but it also devalues the currency and can lead to inflation, which erodes your savings. Next up are the fundamental drivers of a country's strength: education, innovation, and competitiveness. A rising power consistently invests more in its people and technology. You can see this in metrics like education scores, patents filed, and its share of global trade. When a leading nation becomes complacent, its education system may decline, its infrastructure crumbles, and it starts losing its competitive edge to more productive and innovative rivals. This is a slow-moving but critical indicator of a power shift. Within a country, the most visible indicator is wealth, inequality, and social unrest. Dalio points out that when the top 0.1% of the population has as much wealth as the bottom 90%, it's a massive red flag. This economic divide fuels political polarization. People on different sides stop seeing each other as compatriots and more as enemies. We see this play out in the media, in politics, and on the streets. The political center collapses, and extreme ideologies gain traction, leading to gridlock and social friction. On the world stage, we track military strength and geopolitical influence. For decades, one nation's military might be unchallenged, but as a rival power grows its economy, it inevitably begins to expand its military to protect its trade routes and project its influence. This leads to what is known as the Thucydides trap, the dangerous dynamic that occurs when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling one. We see this today in increased spending on defense, technological arms races in areas like AI and cyber warfare, and proxy conflicts around the globe. And finally, perhaps the most important piece of the puzzle, the role of currency. The dominant world power enjoys the exorbitant privilege of having the world's reserve currency. But as it prints more and more money to cover its debts, other countries begin to lose faith in that currency's ability to hold its value. They start looking for alternatives. This process is slow at first, but it can accelerate, leading to a major shift in the global financial system. The decline of a reserve currency is one of the clearest signs that an empire's power is waning. When all these indicators flash red at the same time: high debt, money printing, massive wealth gaps, social unrest, and a rising external challenger. Dalio says you're in the most dangerous, but also the most important part of the cycle. Okay, so we've explored these massive, somewhat scary historical cycles: high debt, internal conflict, shifting world powers. What on earth is a regular person supposed to do about all this? This is where Dalio's framework becomes incredibly practical. It's not about panicking. It's about preparing. Here are the key takeaways for your own financial strategy. The number one principle is diversification. And not just the kind of diversification you hear about on financial news shows. Dalio advocates for radical diversification. That means diversifying across different asset classes, not just stocks and bonds, but also commodities like gold and real assets. It also means diversifying across different countries and currencies. If one country's economy or currency is in decline, you want to have exposure to places that are rising. Don't put all your eggs in one national basket, no matter how safe it seems today. Second, understand the difference between investing in productive assets versus holding cash or safe government bonds. In an era of high debt and money printing, the cash you hold in a bank account is likely to lose its purchasing power over time due to inflation. Bonds can also be risky when central banks are manipulating interest rates. Productive assets are things that can generate real income and grow like businesses, real estate that produces rent, or infrastructure. These are the things that tend to hold their value and grow over the long term, especially during inflationary periods. This leads to the third point. Develop a deep understanding of inflation and deflation and what central banks are doing. Don't just listen to headlines. When the government prints trillions of dollars, ask yourself, where's that money going? How will it affect the price of the things I buy and the assets I own? Understanding these mechanics is no longer just for economists. It's a crucial skill for financial survival. You need to be able to look through the nominal returns and see if your wealth is actually growing in real purchasing power terms. Finally, and most importantly, is the need for financial literacy and adaptability. The world is changing faster than ever. The strategies that worked for your parents or grandparents may not work for you. The greatest investment you can make is in your own knowledge. Read, learn, and stay informed about these big cycles. Be curious and be humble. Recognize that the future will probably look very different from the past, and be mentally flexible enough to adapt your strategy as the cycle unfolds. Your ability to learn and adapt will be your greatest asset. So, to wrap it all up, Ray Dalio's Big Cycle gives us a powerful lens to understand the world. It shows us that history moves in long, predictable waves, driven by debt, internal conflict, and the global balance of power. We've seen how these cycles work, what key indicators to watch for, and most importantly, how we can prepare ourselves financially. The goal isn't to be pessimistic, it's to be realistic and proactive. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but as Mark Twain supposedly said, it often rhymes. By understanding the rhyme and rhythm of history, we can better navigate the present and prepare for the future. Don't be a passive observer of these changes. Be an informed student of the cycle. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this gave you a new way to think about the world and your place in it. What are your thoughts on the big cycle? Do you see these patterns playing out today? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this video valuable, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the ideas that shape our world. See you next time.